Hey everybody, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
You're watching Now Let's Review, and we're going to be reviewing this folding Gyroor C3 next.
All right, so this is a pretty goofy little guy.
Before we start, Jesse, we've been riding this around, we've been testing it out. Do you think this is a toy, or do you think this is like for real?
It would make a pretty decent toy. I think that the big question we're gonna probably have to answer in this episode is this a legit e-bike?
All right, well, let's go through the stats and then we'll kind of get into that. So it's the Gyroor C3 folding and only folding here on the handlebar, so don't think that it like folds in half or anything.
Right, so I mean, you have the height of this seat, which you can remove quite a bit of by...
Or you can take it out.
Take the seat out,
So the question is,
down.
would that fit in your trunk? Yes, it would fit in most trunks.
I think so. The length is pretty long, actually,
right.
Which is nice when you're riding it, but when you're stowing it, not so great. I think that maybe this fits under a desk in a bedroom. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's kind of the idea, is that, you know, having this tall handlebar would be in the way. The folding is pretty nice. The handlebar does get quite out of the way. There's a lot of handlebars that fold down and just kind of stick out at a jaunty angle. This is nice.
I do want to point out though, if you fold it down, then you lose the whole like being able to steer it. So like, don't think you're going to fold it to take it on a train, because it would actually be easier to leave the handlebar up.
Yeah, but the folding is a pretty decent mechanism. It feels strong enough and it's easy to do and undo.
Okay, the first question you're probably asking then is this, what does it cost? And so it's $5.99, but it usually seems to be on sale. I think I just saw it for $3.89. So
quite a difference.
That's where you begin to go like, oh, maybe. So I think the big question you're probably asking yourself is like, could this be a good commuter bike? Like if you have a short commute in a city, because it's small, would this be good for that? And I think that's where you should be thinking about it, and we'll try and answer that for you.
Okay.
It's got a 450 watt hub motor in the rear, but it doesn't feel like 450 watts to me. It feels like 200 watts. Now, maybe the peak output is 450, but it just didn't feel
no, I mean,
very powerful.
We've tested e-bikes with 500 watt motors, and those feel easily twice as powerful as this. Right. So I don't know where they're getting the 450 number. Maybe it's a 450, but they aren't feeding it enough electricity for it to actually do that.
Well, let's lead to that. So that the battery itself is a 36 volts, which is not many volts, so not much power, 10 amp hour, which is very small. And you would think, well, that's great. I should be able to remove it and charge it.
No, so the battery is right in here, which is an aluminum tube that you have no way to remove the battery, which means that if you need to charge this,
which
you do, you need to bring this bike close enough to an outlet that is either inside or undercover, where you can plug it in.
I think that's the first strike against it as a commuter bike, because you would want to charge this at work or at home. Or
and
both.
Leave this locked up outside. Cities are not the kind of, anywhere is not the kind of place where you're just allowed to roll this into wherever you're doing. Right. I mean, maybe you could argue you could hide this under your desk, but that's more up to you, and it's not very conducive to it.
Right. So then you're probably asking about the range. They state, the Gyroor states 28 to 38 miles with pedal assist. I think that is not very likely.
So I want to talk about the pedaling for a second. This has one gear, so there's no gear shifter or anything like that, which is nice. It makes it nice and simple. The pedaling can only get you up to about 11 miles an hour before you are going comically fast with the pedaling, and the rest has to be done with throttle where you're not pedaling.
Right, so they state that the top speed is 18.6 miles an hour, which is class 2, but we really couldn't get it up to that speed.
I wasn't able to reach it even using their speedometer, which typically the speedometer is showing you a lower number. I only got it up to 17 miles an hour going downhill.
Oh, well, let's talk about going uphill.
You're not gonna wanna do that either.
Again,
just
not enough power.
Not enough power in the rear, and the gear ratio is, again, like an 11 mile an hour gear ratio.
Because let's be honest, one of the major pluses of an e-bike is going up slopes and hills, because those are the times when typically you're gonna get sweaty and tired. If it can't even help you do that, then in my opinion, it's not much of an e-bike.
Will it help you? I guess a little bit, but I just didn't notice enough power, even going up slight inclines, for this to be able to help carry you up a hill.
Let's talk about the weight of the rider, because we're both, grown men, and I think that even though it states it can carry 265 pounds or 120 kilograms of load, I feel like this would be much better for a lighter person, either a teenager or a lightweight person, because then you get a little bit more power.
I would say that this might be an interesting proposition for a teenager. This to me feels not like a city commuter for all the reasons that we've mentioned, because you can't remove the battery, so which means that you'd have to take this up to your apartment if you lived in a city. It feels more like a campus commuter or a small town kind of commuter.
Okay.
Somewhere where you're not going to be experiencing many hills, where you're going to have plenty of parking. So like college campuses are kind of nice for that, although the charging would still be a bit of an issue. Are you going to take this in your dorm? And somewhere where you do not need to go far, because again, that range, that pedal assisted range, is not true. I'm gonna guess that you're gonna get close to maybe 10, maybe 12 miles, depending on how much you weigh.
Right. So it's got these kind of comically small tires. They're 14-inch, they're air-filled. And so I just want you guys to keep in mind that at some point you're probably gonna get a flat. And so if it's the front tire, pretty easy to fix. Rear tire gonna be a lot harder because it's got the motor on it.
And the chain, and the brake.
Right, so it's gonna probably be, unless you're really good at it, you're gonna probably bring it to a bike shop for that. I'd like to talk about the disc brakes. It does have front and rear mechanical disc brakes. They were fine for its use case, but nothing to write home about.
I mean, the good news is you're not going fast enough to need them.
Let's talk about the shock absorber. I don't think it was tuned for my weight, because when I got on it, I felt the bike depress, and then when I hit a bump, I didn't feel much give. I think it's tuned for a much lighter rider.
Yes, and I also don't think that it's necessary, in my opinion. I think that this is something that just is adding expense, because they have to buy this component and bolt it to the bike. In fact, actually, you have to bolt it to the bike yourself. When it comes in the box, it actually looks a whole lot smaller, and that's because this component isn't there, and the rear wheel is folded up, touching this. And you have to install this yourself.
Yeah, how hard was that again?
It wasn't that bad. It's pretty trivial, but if you're not like used to assembling things, it could be a bit of an issue. I just don't think this thing needs a shock absorber, to be honest. You're not going that fast. The tires, while very small, will offer you some bounce. If you had to literally do the 36-mile full range, I think you would be seriously regretting it. Nothing about this bike screams 36 miles to me.
I do like that you can adjust the seat without a tool, so it's just this kind of clamp mechanism, which is easy, but you don't actually get as low as I had hoped. For smaller people, it would have been nice to get all the way down. Instead, it bottoms out there, and it only goes up this high, so it's not even great for like a big range of people.
I think that you could get a little bit lower. You can usually take bikes to bike shops, and they can kind of cut the bottom of the tube off, which allows the seat to come down further, but that's an expense that obviously Gyroor is not going to cover for you.
Well, and that's basically because they were hitting the battery pack. I think before, when this was an empty tube, you could actually get the full amount.
Yeah, I don't think this was ever even designed to not hold a battery. I don't think this was designed well at all, in my opinion. But yeah, that's kind of a disappointing thing, that like this is obviously meant for tiny people, and yet the seat can only go this low. You only need to cut an inch off the bottom in order to kind of bottom out the seat, but it is just disappointing that they didn't just put the right size tube on it. I think it was to enable this to go higher, but honestly, the higher you go on this thing, the crazier it gets.
It does have some pretty good lights, a tail light and a headlight that were bright, so that's good. Good visibility. And it has a little weak horn. Just kind of comically fun for a campus, but not good for a city.
Right, this is a pedestrian horn. This is not going to get the attention of any large vehicles around you.
You can actually adjust the handlebars in terms of twist, but that's just to decide on that.
It's mainly, I guess you could take off the handlebar, but you're not going to get it far because there's actual like wiring here.
It does come with a phone mount, which I was surprised to see. I'd be a little bit wary of putting a nice phone on there in case it fell off. Yeah, so in our testing, it was only on kind of very flat surfaces. If you're gonna hit any bumps, it could jiggle the phone free, and I wouldn't want you to.
Yeah, I mean, lots of phone holders they tend to kind of slip unless you crank down on them too hard, and this one would obviously break because it's made of almost entirely plastic.
Let's talk about the handlebar some more. There's a twist throttle here, so it's a half throttle twist, which is it's a nice feature, but not a lot of power. And then there's an LCD screen where you get your speed, your mileage, and your battery, and the battery's only shown in 5 bars. What we kind of found in testing is that with like a lot of these things, it's, you get 5 bars, 5 bars, 5 bars, and then all of a sudden it's like 3, 2, 1. And so it's not really accurate. You don't really know what you have in the battery.
Well, and as you're riding it, the voltage, it's just measuring the voltage of the battery pack, which is again a common method for doing this. There's a thing called voltage drop when you apply a load across a circuit. And so the voltage will drop, which means that your battery indicator starts to go low. And then you stop riding because you get worried about it, and then it comes back up. And that can be confusing for some people. They think that like suddenly the battery has like regained all this energy. It's just that the voltage has come back up. It doesn't mean that the battery has any more energy in it. As soon as you start riding again, it's gonna drop right back down.
And so to me, it's almost meaningless to have an inaccurate meter because then you really don't know anything. So what you're gonna have to do with this bike is just kind of use it on regular trips and realize, oh, okay, this can get me whatever, 10 miles, and then just know that.
So let's talk about the foldability of this e-bike.
And the carryability.
Because I think that, yeah, you think foldable bike, you might think carryable bike. This bike weighs 47.8 pounds. So almost
heavy.
Almost 50 pounds.
I'm surprised.
It's not light. I don't know if it's the battery pack. I don't know if it's the construction.
Yeah, I'm like, where'd they get all the weight?
It's really heavy.
I feel like it's in here.
Right.
I don't know.
It's not a light bike. It looks small, which make you think that you can carry it, but you're obviously not used to e-bikes, and so that's kind of the issue with it. It can fold a little bit smaller. The pedals do have a little folding feature, which lots of folding e-bikes have. It gains you about 2 inches off of the pedal crank, which is kind of a nice thing, but it doesn't make it any gosh darn lighter.
It does have fenders.
Yep, pretty,
which is good.
Cheap plastic fenders.
Keeps the water off you.
Keeps some of the water off you. I don't think they're perfectly designed, but anything is better than nothing. And
there's a 2-hour recharge time from 0%. So it doesn't take that long. That's because the battery's so small. All right, so look, is this a toy that you should buy for one of your kids just to ride around town, or is this a actual commuter e-bike that you should buy for yourself?
I think that the top speed, and I think that it would be able to reach top speed of 18.6 miles an hour if you put a child on it.
Oh, I see.
That's a little fast for a kid. I'm gonna be honest. As a kid, pedaling my bike as fast and as hard as I could, I probably was able to get up to like 16 miles an hour, maybe 12 miles an hour for like 10 seconds.
While your legs held out, right?
While my legs held out. So unless you're raising some Tour de France rider, I don't think that most kids are gonna be able to handle the speed. So then we're talking about increasing the age. Well, as you increase age, you increase size. So there is probably an optimum sized rider for this, and I think it's probably gonna be somewhere between 12 and 18 years old, depending on how fast the kid grows and how much broccoli they eat.
Yeah, like 80 to 120 pounds would probably be the ideal size for this bike.
In that size category and age, this is kind of an interesting proposition, but...
So you're saying it might be like a good starter bike?
Like a good starter e-bike, because let's say that you're going on an e-bike ride with a family, because lots of families love e-biking together because you can make all the distance. This won't have that much range. E-bike rides that we go on, we do like 20 miles, no problemo. This one, I would be worried about the range. That would be the biggest thing. But for shorter stints, for riding a couple blocks to the friend's house, for riding a couple blocks to school, I think that it's kind of neat. I would love to see that, but I just don't know how actually feasible it would really be. Because of the charging, I mean, this is like a garage charger. You have to bring this into probably a garage. Even bringing this up a few front steps is going to be a pain.
Yeah, so there you have it. I mean, I think if your use case fits this bike, then because of the price, it might be a good like starter bike. But other than that, if you have any problems with charging or range or weight, then you should move on.
Right, use case, cheap.
Well, I hope you found this useful. Let us know down in the comments if you have questions or other ideas. And if you would help us out, hit the subscribe button and the like button. That helps us share e-mobility ideas with more and more people because these can help a lot of people.
And we'll see you next time. Now let's review.